moving forward, we have another speaker today, and the first time I met our next guest speaker, it was in Thailand during the World Ruby Forum in Bangkok, and he gave a terrific presentation on Ruby, and he had a microphone like this. And I remember I was a speaker on another convention, and I wanted something like this, and there was never something so fancy. So I only had like those handheld microphones, but today I'm the one with the microphone. And Sean Gilbertson, are you wearing one of those? Yeah, I made it happen, so now I'm the one with the fancy microphone. So Sean, he will be our next guest speaker. He's the CEO of London-based Gemfields that everyone knows. It's a global leader on African gemstones, promoting transparency, responsible sourcing, basically trying to do the right thing and creating a positive impact on the local communities and countries where they are established. We all know that they have the lovely ruby mine in Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado province, and also the historical Kagem mine, the Emerald Kagem mine in Zambia. And the Gemfields also has been reinstating the historic Fabergé brand, the St. Petersburg historic Fabergé brand that we all know about for sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Sean Gilbertson. Thank you very much. Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. That is what I was looking for. Thank you very much. First, may I say how absolutely lovely it is to actually see everybody and human beings in the flesh, face to face, rather than sitting in your sweatpants below the Zoom table with all those wonderful backgrounds. A pleasure and a privilege to be here. Second, Ahmed, I think, has departed the room, but I just did want to say that it is the constant applied effort and energy and love over protracted periods of time that get things delivered. And DMCC back in 2006, 2007 was an idea on somebody's desk, a vision. And I have to say, the vision was so tall that to stand here today and to see what's actually been delivered, as the French would say, Ahmed and your DMCC team, chapeau, a salute to you. With that, Jeffrey Post, I'm now going to see whether or not I can get my series of graphs to go toe-to-toe with your images. A somewhat futile attempt, but the one thing I have resolved to do, having never been to the Smithsonian, is to change the tickets on my next trip to Washington, D.C. So thank you very much for that. We are hopefully going to do a quick gallop through diverse galaxies in the colored gemstone universe. I think, recognizing many of the faces here, most of you are familiar with Gemfields, but in short, we have the pleasure and privilege of owning and operating 75% of what are today the world's largest emerald mine and the world's largest ruby mine, respectively. We are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and also on the London Stock Exchange. We have no controlling shareholder. In other words, we have essentially democratized colored gemstone mining. Anybody practically can become a shareholder in the business, and at the moment we have a market cap which is still very small of about $240 million, of which around 40% is held in cash. And there are so many checks and balances in this day and age, particularly with listed companies, and I wanted to make a specific mention of this individual in the middle of the African continent. In 2021, we saw an unbelievable trend of major jewelry houses starting to pay serious attention to their supply chain. In 2022, that trend went ballistic. And every single one of the 3 biggest luxury groups on the planet have appointed in 22 external experts to crawl all over our organization and our mining operations with visits to each of those mines in order to make sure that we're doing our job correctly. It is now at a point where for 2 of those groups, we actually report to them on a quarterly basis about our activities, about incidents, and down to things like the number of public police officers that have been provided with things like human rights abuse training. Quite remarkable, and we think that's a trend that we welcome, and it's going to be a big one for years to come. So for those who get ahead of the curve, that's the way to go. This is a graph that shows the Uncom trade data for worked gemstones. So essentially we mean not rough. And it's remarkable to see the growth that the industry has been through from sort of 2012, 2013. Obviously, we can see the impact of our friendly neighborhood virus in 2020. And I was hoping to show you today what had happened in 2022. However, sadly, the Uncom trade database has not yet received the reports from all of its constituent components. And so if we have a quick look at 1 or 2 follow-on graphs, this is what Uncom trade says about Thailand. 1 health warning, please ignore the y-axis. The numbers on the y-axis here are not correct. The trend of the graph, however, is correct. There is some double counting on the numbers on the y-axis. But very interesting to see the spectacular growth and also contrast the level of imports versus the level of exports. And again, the very dramatic impact of what happened with COVID-19. By contrast, India, unbelievable growth in the imports, and quite remarkable to see the impact of Indian demonetization, which I think was late 2016, and what that did to the business. Here's a remarkable graph. This graph shows 2 World Bank indices. At the bottom, you've got the Corruption Control Index for all the countries monitored by the World Bank. And on the left-hand side, you've got the Government Effectiveness Index. The bubble sizes that you're looking at are the number of artisanal miners in each of those countries. We think this graph is quite remarkable because of the strength of the correlation that it shows. In essence, what it says is that the number of artisanal miners in a country are a proxy for how bad the government is. In other words, the worse a government is at looking after its citizens and creating jobs and economic employment, the more artisanal miners you are going to see. As we think about the number of battery minerals these days that get subsumed into our supply chain from sources that often are artisanal, we need to think very carefully about whether or not that is not just an excuse to buy cheap minerals that do not have the cost associated with them of doing things properly. And so by subsuming those minerals and finding ways to say that they are okay, we are effectively treating the symptoms, but we are forgetting entirely about the disease. And the disease very often is bad government. To demonstrate that fact to you, we're looking here at all of Gemfields' auctions of rubies from Mozambique. And you can see those kicking off in 2014, running through to 2022. We can contrast that with amazing data, which you can look up yourselves if you're bored and looking for something to do, on the website of the Bank of Mozambique. They publish their balance of payments data. So this is not to be confused with exports. This rather is the money coming into the country that is tagged emeralds, rubies, and sapphires. And bear in mind that any cash coming into the country over $10,000 must also be classified according to this system. And so we can take the entire sum of all the money that's flown into Mozambique for emeralds, rubies, and sapphires across the last decade, and we can compare it with what has come out of the Gemfields ruby mine. And this is the terribly shocking statistic. Over the course of a decade, the Montepuez ruby mine accounts for 94% of the monetary inflows into the whole of Mozambique from all of their emeralds, all of their rubies, and all of their sapphires. This is not a boastful remark about our market share in Mozambique. Rather, this is a comment about the disgusting manner in which colored gemstones evaporate from countries like Mozambique, and what happens in Madagascar is even worse. And there's a session tomorrow on ESG and social responsibility and sustainability. And we need to ask ourselves whether the under-declaration of the value of gemstones from the host countries does not in fact perpetrate a crime, a theft against the host nation, and therefore deem those gemstones to be tainted minerals. For the Montepuez ruby mine, the range of prices that we get per gram is shown in this table. The bottom of the range product is about 2 cents per gram. Top of the range product about $600,000 per gram. So the price changes 30 million times. Quite remarkable. Mercedes-Benz changes perhaps 10 times. 30 million times for rubies. And that's why the underpricing of the minerals at the point of export is so easily done, because nobody can argue. And so what we say to many of our host governments is that allowing the price of the colored gemstones to be agreed at the point of export has resulted in many resource hosting nations losing hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And this is a major issue that we need to look at as an industry. One of the checkpoints for responsible gemstones must be, was this gemstone exported from the host nation at a reasonable or fair value? And sadly, based on the data we've just looked at, that clearly is not happening. Looking briefly at Mozambique, 94% we've seen at the moment has come from MRM, Montepuez Ruby Mining, insofar as the official data is concerned. Of course, there's a lot of smuggling and a lot of stuff leaves the country without being properly reported. We then obviously have a very significant informal and illegal supply. A lot of that is organized by highly sophisticated syndicates. And we then obviously also have a number of other structured miners, such as Fura Gems and also Gemrock, which is located to the east of where the Montepuez Ruby mine is. And Gemrock, we believe at the moment, is a suspended operation after an attack by insurgents during the course of last year. I should point out to you that it would be unfair to say that the supply of Mozambique ruby is secure for the future. 48 hours ago, just 80 kilometers north of our ruby mine, we for the second time had to evacuate a team of people, 115 persons in total, from our gold exploration project after insurgents shot and killed 5 individuals in a village called Nairoto. The operating conditions are very difficult. It's one of the poorest provinces. It is the poorest province in one of the world's poorest countries. They desperately need economic support, jobs, and projects like the big gas projects coming on stream, and of course also proper responsible ruby mining. And therefore we say country of origin is a phrase that just shouldn't really be used anymore. It's absolutely meaningless when it comes to thinking about responsible practices. Rather, we have to move to a mine of origin model. And that means that if you don't know which mine it came from and who did the mining, you should not be buying that gemstone. And based on our experience with the 3 biggest luxury groups and the audits that they're doing, this is the direction that the industry is moving in. These are examples of illegal pits dug on the Montepuez Ruby mining concession, which is a 340 square kilometer license, so it's very large indeed. I clearly don't need to describe how dangerous this practice is. The pit in the center ran down for about 15 meters. These are loose soils, muds, and gravels. And on the far left-hand side, you can see an individual being pulled out after the heavy rain, which obviously the area is very famous for. And here's another thing that we need to think about seriously as an industry. This graph shows you the cumulative total of the number of persons who have died in pit collapse incidents on the Montepuez Ruby mining concession. 90 people. Sadly, this sort of thing is not confined to ruby mining in Mozambique. It is prevalent across Africa. How is it that with so many initiatives to become a more sentient society, that there is no NGO or there is no body that tracks this data and publishes it and makes it available so that consumers and the midstream can make more informed decisions about the minerals that they are purchasing. And I say again, if you don't know which mine it came from and who did the mining, there is a very real risk that it was mined by one of the individuals that is but a statistic on this graph. At Gemfields, and as somebody who was born in Africa, we care a great deal about whether or not the resource hosting nations get their fair share of the value, the true value of their gemstones. And about an hour and a half ago this morning, we put out on the news wires our updated figures for 2022. And so basically what we're trying to show people is a very simple way of what percentage of the resource value is going to the host nation's government. And so all we do is we take the mineral royalties that have been paid, we add the corporation tax that's been paid, plus dividends, if that's applicable, and we divide it by the total revenue from that mine in the period under consideration. And that gives you a very simple percentage. So if we look at the 27%, what that means is that for the Montepuez Ruby mine in 2022, its G factor, which stands for governance, government, and good practice, was 27%. So 27 cents in every dollar of our revenue went to the Mozambique government, which is a really remarkable figure. And if you go all the way to the right-hand side, you can see that since we started the mine, the total revenues are just above 900 million, and you can see that almost, well, that figure is now north of $200 million has been paid to the Mozambican government, and that means that 23% of our revenue has gone to the Mozambique government. The table at the bottom is for Zambia, for the Khartoum Emerald Mine, and you can see on the far right-hand side, since we started the mine in 2008, 17 cents in every dollar of revenue has gone to the government. And we talk about transparency, but how many mining companies, both in the colored gemstone sector and also further afield, publish this data? If we are to be responsible custodians of the host nation's citizens' resources, it cannot be done properly without serious transparency. Quick graph for you on what happens every day at the Khartoum Emerald Mine. On the far left-hand side, this is every day. So every day, we start by moving 38 million kilograms of rock. And that 38 million kilograms of rock, at the end of the day, becomes 120 grams of premium emerald. 38 million kilograms of rock comes down to 120 grams of premium emerald. And all of our revenue, or 93% of our revenue, comes from that 120 grams per day. Anybody walking into a bank or a venture capital firm with this as a business plan is going to get thrown out by the scruff of their neck. And if at this point your face doesn't look like that, then I might have to repeat the explanation as to what you've just seen. I'm going to jump galaxies now, and we're going to go and talk about coal. Very unpopular topic these days. In 1998, I had the privilege of being involved in the creation of an industry-owned platform for buying and selling coal. And that platform still operates today and it's owned by the businesses that you see on screen. And the critical thing at the time was those players did not want to be behind the curve. They wanted to be on board and part of creating an industry-owned platform that they could help to steer and guide in a way that worked for the industry, rather than having a bunch of techies do it for them. And so we believe that in a similar vein, the colored gemstone industry would benefit from a similar platform specifically for cut and polished gemstones. We also believe, after review, that that industry could be built around GemCloud, or the gemcloud.com, which many of you will know about. And in fact, in 2022, we started supporting GemCloud and first became an investor in GemCloud. We're a minority investor. We have no ambitions of being a controlling investor. And in 2022, we also invited other players of good standing to get involved in an industry-owned platform. That process is underway, and very significant progress has been made with the GemCloud platform in the last 60 to 90 days after some significant changes to the structuring. But for those of you that haven't come across it, one of the major advantages is the standardization of videos and also of their imagery. That means that you can do side-by-side comparisons. It's an, we think, superb inventory management system. It allows you to white label any gemstones that you want to send out to your customers. You send them a link, they come and see the gemstone, they can see the photographs, they can see the videos, they can see multiple certificates, and of course, you can issue your invoices, do all of the logistics, deal with the traceability, all on one platform. And what's more, you are also able to make your inventory in the system available to other downstream platforms. Finally, Beryllium Diffusion was mentioned a short while ago, and I'm pleased to say that Gemfields, back in July of 2020, decided to sponsor a book that really celebrates the legends and the amazing stories that come out of our industry, focused, of course, on Africa. And the author of that book is storyteller and journalist Richa Goyal-Sikri, who is with us today. And we're super excited. I've had the privilege of sneak peek of some of the stories. I can't begin to tell you how many hours Richa has spent interviewing many people across our industry, collecting photographs. You've got a photograph here of the legendary Campbell Bridges, and also a photograph of the old Cobra Gravelot emerald mine down in South Africa. And this book, we hope, is going to be out in around September of this year. And it tells wonderful stories and also does quite a lot of education as one goes along. At this juncture, I think Richa is about to throw her pencil at me because she's spent so long doing it. But if anybody has wonderful stories about African colored gemstones, there she is. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I've run a little over time. Thank you very much indeed for your time and attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Son. I was standing for a half an hour already, but me standing or sit down is the same thing. Anyway, thank you so much. I was expecting to hear about the positive impact projects that you have been doing, Gemfields, with Edward Johnson, that many of you know from GIA and also from the CIBJO webinars. He's now a celebrity, more famous than I am anyway, and I'm jealous because of it. But anyway, thank you very much for your presentation. It's good to see that people are doing the right thing and they are concerned about doing the right thing.